I have processed 712 candidates across 9 enrollment cycles at this institution. I want that noted before anything else I write in this log. 712. Every species that qualifies for predator division. I have seen Korathi adolescents who could bench press a dropship engine. I have watched Velthari females whose echolocation can detect a heartbeat through 6 feet of reinforced plating. I have processed 3 Draxani warriors who arrived carrying the heads of the creatures that tried to ambush them on their way to the spaceport. I say this so you understand my baseline, my reference point, what I consider normal. On Cycle 7, Day 1, a human walked through the intake bay. I did not notice him at first. The bay was full. 48 candidates in total, representing 11 species. The Korathi were doing what Korathi do on first arrival, circling the room, marking territory with scent glands, already establishing dominance hierarchies in the first 10 minutes. The Velthari had arranged themselves in a corner formation and were communicating in high-frequency bursts too fast for my translator to catch. The 3 Draxani were standing in the center of the bay, and nobody was going near them, which was the correct social instinct. In the middle of all this, sitting on a bench near the north wall, was a human. He had a gray bag with 2 shoulder straps, the kind you could buy at any transit station in the Orion Arm for about 4 credits. He had it on his lap and he was looking around the bay with what I can only describe as calm, quiet attention. Not fear, not posturing, just looking. The way someone looks when they arrive somewhere new and want to understand it before they open their mouth. I almost walked past him. Then I did a second count of my manifest and came up 1 entry short, so I came back and stood in front of him. Name, I said. Dren Calloway, he said. Enrollment number 44. I found him on the manifest. Calloway Dren, species, human, age 23 standard years. Prior service, 2 years, Frontier Peacekeeping Corps, Border Station 9. The enrollment category field said Predator Division, Combat Track. I looked at the manifest. I looked at him. I looked at the manifest again. There may be a processing error, I said. Okay, he said, and he waited. That was the first thing I noticed about him. He did not argue. He did not panic. He said okay and he waited, like a man who had been in situations that required patience before and knew that patience was the correct tool. I tried to reach the enrollment office. The enrollment office was experiencing, as it always does on intake day, a complete organizational collapse involving 6 data systems and 3 interdepartmental disputes. I was on hold for 40 minutes. During those 40 minutes, Dren Calloway sat on that bench with his gray bag on his lap and waited. At the end of 40 minutes, I got a message that the enrollment office would review the matter and respond within 48 hours. Standard protocol in a situation like that is to place the candidate in a holding observation room until the error is corrected. I looked at the holding room log. It was full. 3 candidates from a different division had been routed there by mistake, and the holding room was at capacity. I looked at the main barracks assignment list. Barracks 7 had 1 open bunk. Candidate Calloway was the last unassigned. I made a decision I have thought about every day since. I assigned him to Barracks 7. I put a note in the system, enrollment verification pending, and I sent a second message to the enrollment office flagging the species discrepancy. Dren Calloway picked up his gray bag, received his barracks assignment chip, and walked into the main corridor of the Predator Division without looking back. 48 hours came and went. The enrollment office did not respond. I want to be honest. I want to be completely honest because I am writing this after the fact and I know what happened and I am fighting the urge to make myself sound wiser than I was. I am not going to do that. I am going to write what I actually thought and felt. When I saw the human in my combat assessment group, my first thought was that someone was playing a joke on me. Not a complicated thought, not a nuanced one, just, this is a joke. I had 32 years of combat instruction experience at the time of Harvest 7. I had graduated, across various postings, over 2,000 warriors who were currently active in theaters ranging from the Calvary Corridor to the Outer Rim Enforcement Network. My record of field survival among my graduates was the highest in the institution. I am not listing these things to brag. I am listing them to explain that I knew what a combat candidate was supposed to look like. Dren Calloway did not look like a combat candidate. He was 178 centimeters tall, by Velthari standards that put him at roughly chest height on the average male candidate. He weighed, by his intake measurements, 81 kilograms. His arms were not remarkable. His chest was not remarkable. He had brown hair that was slightly too long for military regulations. Not dramatically long, just the kind of long that says the last regulation haircut was about 3 weeks ago, and he had not bothered to get another one. He had a small scar along his left jawline, old, healed clean. I later learned he got it from a piece of hull shrapnel during a decompression event at Border Station 9 when he was 21 years old. He had been conscious during the decompression. He had stayed at his post. I did not know that yet. What I knew on day one was that I had a human in my combat assessment group, and I had to figure out what to do with him. The first assessment exercise is what we call the crucible opening. It is not a fighting exercise. I want to be clear about that. It is a stress assessment. The candidates do not know that. They believe it is a combat evaluation, but what we are actually measuring is cognitive function under extreme physiological stress. We create a situation that produces maximum adrenaline response, and then we observe how each candidate's cognition degrades or holds. The exercise, candidates are locked in a chamber. The chamber fills with a sound frequency specifically tuned to produce dread response in most known species. Lights drop to near zero. Temperature drops 40 degrees in 90 seconds. And then, this is the key part, nothing happens. For 15 minutes, nothing happens. The chamber just sits there, dark and cold and loud, and we watch through sensors to see what the candidates do. Most candidates spend the first 3 minutes managing their fight or flight response. It is involuntary. Even the best trained warrior will experience the physiological surge. What we are measuring is the recovery curve. How fast does higher cognition reassert itself after the initial surge? A candidate who recovers full cognitive function within 3 minutes has an excellent prognosis. 5 minutes is acceptable. 8 minutes means we are going to have a conversation about whether combat track is right for them. I watched Dren Calloway on the sensor feed. The lights dropped, the sound hit, the temperature dove. 40 seconds of initial surge, I could see it in his biometrics, the heart rate spike, the cortisol burst. Every candidate in the room had it. The human had it. And then 40 seconds. That was his recovery time. 40 seconds. The fastest I had ever recorded before that day was 1 minute 12 seconds. A Draxani candidate from the 3rd cycle of my tenure, who went on to become a celebrated field commander. 40 seconds. I watched Calloway's biometrics flatten into something I can only describe as operational calm. Heart rate still elevated, not unreasonably for the conditions, actually appropriate, but higher brain function indicators fully restored. He was not fighting the sensation. He was not suppressing it. He had just filed it, set it aside, and gone back to looking around the chamber. The next thing he did was check the walls, methodically, every panel. He was not panicking, he was mapping the space. He was learning it. 15 minutes later, when the exercise ended and the lights came back up, he was sitting on the floor of the chamber with his back to the strongest wall and his face toward the door. I remember writing in my notes that evening, check enrollment status on Calloway. I did not follow up on that. I have regretted that. But I also, and I am being honest here, I was curious. I wanted to see what would happen next. This log was kept voluntarily by the candidate, and submitted to the archive upon request. It is informal and unfiltered. Language has been translated but style preserved. Day 1. New cycle. I am the strongest one in this barracks. I can tell by looking. Korathi instinct, you always know the hierarchy before a word is said. The Velthari across from my bunk is strong, but she favors her left side. The Draxani by the window could challenge me, but we have not established terms yet. There are 2 Belhari twins near the door who look like they've been trained since birth, which they probably have, because that is what Belhari do. And then there is the human in the bunk by the back wall. I have met humans before. I spent a transit cycle at Frontier Station Delos where they were common. They are soft. Not weak-minded, not stupid. I do not say soft as an insult, just as a physical fact. They do not have the density. You can feel it when you stand near a human. There is a quality of fragility that is not their fault and not something they can train away. The human in the bunk by the back wall had all of that. Soft, small, brown hair. He also had the following things on his nightstand when I walked past. 1 data pad, 1 small printed photograph, a woman and 2 children based on size maybe his family. 1 compact tool kit with fold-out functions, the kind field engineers use. 1 knife, folded, clipped to the edge of the nightstand within reach. He had placed the knife where he could reach it from the bed. I noticed that. I did not say anything, but I noticed. He introduced himself that evening. Went around the room, offered his name, offered a handshake. Not all species shake hands. The Velthari looked at his offered hand like it was a foreign object, which for them it basically was, but he did not make it weird. He adapted. When the Velthari did not shake his hand, he gave a slight nod instead, just a small one, like he had done that translation 100 times before. He had, I later learned, spent 2 years on a border station, with 17 species represented in the crew. That evening, someone, I will not say who, decided to test him. The Draxani by the window had been watching him all day, and by evening had apparently decided enough was enough. Draxani testing is not subtle. He walked to the human's bunk, stood over him. He has 60 centimeters and easily 100 kilograms on Callaway, and said, in trade common so everyone could understand, "You are in the wrong place." The human looked up from his data pad. He did not sit up. He just tilted his head and looked at the Draxani and said, "Maybe. But I'm here now." The Draxani waited for more. There was no more. The human went back to his data pad. The Draxani stood there for another 5 seconds, which is a long time when someone is standing over your bunk, and then he walked back to his own bunk and sat down. I wrote in my log that night, the human is strange. I did not know, yet that strange was the understatement of the cycle. Social integration, no conflicts logged, no altercations, no complaints. I want to stop on that last one, because it is not what I expected. In a cohort that includes Korathi, Draxani, and Velthari candidates, no complaints from a human in the first 10 days is a result that should not be possible. The social dynamics in a Predator Division barracks are what I would describe as an ecosystem of controlled aggression. Every candidate is trying to establish where they stand. That means pressure. Constant, ambient, sometimes very physical pressure. The weakest appearing candidate in any given barracks will receive most of that pressure. In Barracks 7, the weakest appearing candidate by every physical metric was candidate Callaway. And yet no complaints, no altercations. I pulled the barracks sensor logs to understand why. What I found was a series of small moments that individually were nothing. Collectively, they were something. Incident 1, Day 4. Candidate Vetharam Korathi steps into Callaway's personal space in the equipment room, which is a standard dominance probe. Callaway does not step back. He also does not step forward. He holds position and says something in trade common. My translator catch was partial. Something like, "I've got no argument with you, but I don't step back." Vetharam stares at him for 7 seconds, then moves around him to get his own equipment. Incident 2, Day 6. One of the Belhari twins takes Calloway's training ration from the table, deliberate. Calloway watches it happen. Then he goes to the Belhari, sits down across from him and says something. I have the full translator record this time. Give it back and I won't remember it happened. The Belhari looks at him, looks around. Gives the ration back. Calloway eats it without another word. Incident 3, Day 9. A Velthari candidate from Barracks 4, not from Calloway's barracks, an outside actor, corners Calloway in the corridor near the training wing. The Velthari is twice his height. He says in front of 6 witnesses that the human is a mistake and should go home. Calloway looks at him for a moment. Then he says, when you're done, I have a training session to get to. He walks around the Velthari and continues down the corridor. The Velthari stood there for what witnesses described as a very long time after that. The pattern I was observing was not aggression. It was not submission. It was something I had no clean category for at the time. The human was not fighting for position. He was simply declining to lose it. There is a difference. I have spent 32 years trying to teach that difference to warrior candidates, and most of them never fully grasp it. The human had already grasped it. I started paying closer attention. I will tell you the moment I started taking him seriously. It was week 3, the night navigation exercise. The night navigation exercise is, in theory, a simple test of spatial reasoning and environmental adaptation. In practice, it is one of the most dangerous exercises in the Predator Division curriculum, because it takes place in the deep forest sector of the Institute's northern training grounds, and the deep forest sector contains 8 species of bioluminescent predator fauna that are not lethal but will certainly hurt you significantly if provoked, and the exercise is designed to place candidates in close proximity to them. We were grouped in teams of 4. My team, myself, Vetharam, one of the Belhari twins whose name was Jath, and Calloway. I had Velthari echolocation. Vetharam had Korathi night vision. Jath had Belhari heat sensing. 3 of us had biological adaptations that made the dark forest a manageable environment. Calloway had a small infrared monocular and a compass that he had apparently brought from whatever kit he'd had at his previous posting. That was it. For the first 2 kilometers, everything was fine. We moved at a good pace. I navigated primary, and Calloway mostly stayed slightly behind the group and to the left, which I took at the time for caution or uncertainty. At kilometer 2.3, Jath caught a heat signature in the underbrush ahead. Large, moving slow, a nocturnal razorback, one of the fauna types I mentioned, unpleasant but manageable if you give them space. We stopped. We were discussing the best route around it as a group. The standard approach, wide arc left, avoid the creature's territorial radius, continue to objective. Calloway said quietly, there are 2 more to the right. We all looked right. I pushed my echolocation in that direction. He was right. There were 2 more razorbacks in the brush to the right, about 40 meters out. They had been downwind. I had not detected them because I had been focused forward. With 3 razorbacks positioned the way they were, our wide arc option had just become a much more complicated problem. None of us had detected the ones to the right. Calloway had detected them. How? I asked him. Sound, he said. Different breathing pattern than the one ahead. Slower, lower frequency, 2 distinct sources. I am a Velthari. My species has some of the finest auditory processing in the known galaxy. I had not heard the additional razorbacks until I specifically pushed my echolocation in that direction. Calloway had heard them with his biological ears. He had heard them while we were talking, while he was supposedly the least equipped member of the team. He had been listening to the environment continuously, underneath the conversation, in parallel. He had never stopped. I did not say anything about that in the moment. We navigated the razorback situation successfully. Calloway suggested a route through the gap between the leftmost creature and the two on the right, which was tight but workable, and we made the objective 6 minutes ahead of schedule. That night back in the barracks, I lay on my bunk and thought about it for a long time. A human with no biological night adaptations, no echolocation, no heat sensing, had detected a threat that 3 species with active biological sensors had missed. Because he had been listening, the whole time just listening. I began, that night, to revise my assessment of candidate Calloway. Patient Calloway Dren, human, candidate Harvest 7. Presenting condition: 3 fractured fingers on right hand, sustained during ground combat exercise. Moderate bruising across upper torso. Minor lacerations on forehead, cleaned and sealed. The injuries were sustained in what the incident report filed by Instructor Malaxorn describes as an unanticipated contact scenario during Week 4's open-floor combat assessment. The open-floor combat assessment is unstructured. Candidates fight who they choose, stop when they choose, and the instructors observe. It is designed to show natural fighting tendencies and species instinct combat behavior. I am going to record what I saw because I was present at the exercise in my capacity as standing medical officer, and I feel it is relevant to this patient's file. Candidate Calloway was not involved in the open-floor exercise for approximately the first hour. He was one of several candidates who observed rather than participated initially, which is a valid tactical choice. Some candidates prefer to study the floor before committing. I watched him during this period. He was watching the fighters with an intensity that I noted at the time as unusual. Not casual observation, active study. At the 90-minute mark, he was challenged directly by a Korathi candidate from Barracks 3, not from his own barracks, a larger candidate than Vetharam, which is saying something. The Korathi had been dominant in the floor exercise all morning and was clearly looking for a symbolic final statement. Calloway accepted the challenge. I want to be honest about what I thought when that happened. I positioned myself closer to the floor because I expected a medical intervention to be required fairly quickly. What happened instead is something I have struggled to describe accurately. The Korathi hit first. He always hit first. It was his pattern all morning, overwhelming speed and force from the opening. By our measurements, the initial strike carried approximately 1,200 newtons of force. That is enough force to fracture a human sternum. Calloway was not in the position the strike was aimed at. He had moved. Not backward. Backward is where the Korathi expected him to be, where any reasonable candidate would have been. He had moved to the side and slightly forward, inside the arc of the strike, close enough that the full force did not connect. He took a glancing blow to the left shoulder, which he later described to me as fine, just a bruise, and which I documented as a moderate contusion, but the Korathi's full strike hit empty air. From inside the Korathi's reach, Calloway hit him 3 times in a specific sequence that I later had analyzed by the Institute's combat assessment specialists. The sequence targeted a pressure point cluster in the Korathi's secondary jaw musculature, a nerve bundle in their lower left neck segment, and the inner elbow joint of the striking arm. None of the strikes were powerful by warrior standards. All 3 were precise to within what the analysis described as millimeter accuracy. The Korathi went to one knee. In 12 years of observing combat assessments, I have never seen a Korathi go to one knee. The floor went quiet. The entire exercise floor went quiet. The Korathi recovered after a moment. The strikes were not damaging, just disorienting, targeted to temporarily interrupt specific neural pathways, and stood. He looked at Calloway for a long time. Then he stepped back. Calloway's fractured fingers came from a follow-up exchange with a Belhari candidate who challenged him immediately after the Korathi incident, apparently motivated by competitive spirit. The Belhari landed 2 hits, both of which Calloway took rather than evading, absorbing them, I realized, to clear his positioning for the counter. One of those hits fractured the fingers. He did not stop fighting when the fingers fractured. I have the biometric record. I know the moment the fracture occurred. He registered pain, clear as daylight in his vitals, and kept going for another 90 seconds until he chose to disengage. He chose to disengage. I want to be clear about that. He was not stopped. He stepped off the floor, looked at his hand, flexed his fingers, which I watched from across the room with medical horror, and walked to my station. "I think something's broken," he said. 3 fingers, he was right. He sat quietly while I treated him and answered my medical questions in a cooperative, calm manner. At no point did he express distress. At no point did he complain. When I told him he was restricted from combat training for 72 hours, he nodded, asked if he could attend the theory sessions in the meantime, and when I said yes, he said thank you. I have treated Korathi, who screamed when I said a broken bone. I have treated Draxani, who refused treatment entirely on cultural grounds. I have treated candidates who wept openly and ones who passed out. I treated one who said thank you. Compiled for archive, voluntary submission. I want to tell you about the training simulation in week 6. By week 6, the human had a reputation in the barracks. Not the kind of reputation that comes from people talking about it. The kind that comes from people not quite talking about it. The kind where things happen and everybody sees them and nobody knows exactly what to say about what they saw. The week 6 simulation was a hostage and extraction scenario. Standard setup. A target is being held in a defended facility. 2 teams of 4 compete to extract the target before the other team or before the simulated defenders can neutralize both teams. Scoring was on time, casualty minimization, and target condition on extraction. My team versus Barracks 2. Barracks 2 had the 2 strongest individual fighters in the cycle. A Draxani male named Karathvel, who was genuinely frightening to stand near, and a Velthari tracker who was so good she could follow your footprints by scent. They had been the top team in every prior simulation. We were not expected to win. The setup was a 2-story facility mock-up in the Eastern Training Wing. The target was on the 2nd floor. The defenders were automated sensor turrets, and 2 Barracks 2 candidates playing defender roles. Karathvel and the Velthari tracker were our opposition team. The scenario started. We had 15 minutes. Our plan, Sora's plan, she did most of the tactical thinking for our team, was a 2-vector approach. Sora and Jath coming through the southern access point, me and Calloway coming through the north. Divide the defenders, create confusion, extract from whichever direction had clearer egress. The problem was the sensor turrets. The facility had 6 of them, each covering a specific arc, and together they left almost no gap in coverage. We had studied the layout in our prep window, and the consensus was that we would take at minimum 2 turret hits getting to the target, which would count as casualties and hurt our score. Calloway had been quiet through most of the planning. Quiet in the specific way I had learned by that point meant he was working something out. 10 minutes into our prep window, he said, "What frequency are the turrets running on?" Sora checked the technical brief. She told him the frequency. He was quiet for another 2 minutes. Then he said, "The turret in the northeast corner is mounted at an angle that puts it in conflict with the turret on the north wall if both are triggered simultaneously. They'll cross-reference and create a 1.8-second reset gap in the overlap zone." We looked at him. He pulled out a small notebook, an actual physical paper notebook, which I found strange. I later learned he always had one, and he had sketched the turret positions and their coverage arcs from memory. He was right. I want you to understand what he had done. In a 15-minute prep window with a technical brief, without a data pad, without any processing tools, he had memorized the positions of 6 turrets, calculated their overlapping coverage arcs, and identified a timing-dependent vulnerability that our entire team, including a Velthari with enhanced spatial processing, had not found. We used the gap. We got through with 0 turret hits. We extracted the target in 11 minutes and 40 seconds. Barracks 2's best prior time was 13 minutes 20. Karathvel's opposition team ran into Sara and Jath on the south approach, and the resulting exchange knocked both of them out of the scenario. Sara is very good, but the point is that even before that, we were going to beat the time. Instructor Malak Sorn reviewed the scenario recording that afternoon. I was walking past the review room, and I heard her stop the playback at the point where Calloway first identifies the turret gap, and then restart it and watch it again. I kept walking, but I heard her restart it. After week 6, Barracks 2 stopped looking at us the way they had been looking at us since the start. Week 7. I need to write down what happened in week 7 before the details blur. The Institute runs an exercise in week 7 of every cycle called the Trial of Pressure. It is one of our oldest exercises. The format is simple. Each candidate is placed alone in a room with a senior instructor whose job is to break them. Not physically, verbally, psychologically, through argument and provocation and relentless pressure. The goal is to find what a candidate does when their identity, their competence, their right to be in the room is challenged at the deepest level. Most candidates get angry. Anger is manageable, it is energy, and energy can be shaped. Some candidates shut down. That is more concerning, because a warrior who shuts down under social pressure will shut down under fire. Very rare candidates remain composed, and composure is what we train toward, but even composed candidates typically show their tells. The small moments where something breaks through. I conducted Calloway's trial of pressure myself. I want to be exact about what I said to him. This is from my notes taken immediately after the session. I told him he had no business being in the room. I told him his species was a biological error, not a soldier species, not a warrior species, a species that had survived through luck and environment, not through anything inherent. I told him that every accomplishment he had achieved in the cycle so far was the result of more advanced candidates operating below their capacity, and that the moment any of them decided to stop holding back, he would fold. I told him he knew this. I told him to look at himself and really look, really honestly, and tell me he belonged here. I told him the system had made a mistake bringing him in, and deep down he agreed with me, and the only honorable thing was to admit it. I want to be honest about why I went this hard. I had been watching him for 7 weeks. I had been revising my assessment continuously, and some part of me, I am going to admit this, wanted to see if I could find the bottom. Every candidate has a bottom. That is what the trial is for. I wanted to find his. He sat across from me for the entire session, 42 minutes. He did not get angry. He did not shut down. He did not argue. He listened. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "You're probably right that I don't belong here by design. I was sent here by a mistake that nobody's fixed yet, and I've known that since day one. But I'm here. And everything you just said, I've been saying a version of that to myself every morning since I arrived. It's not news to me." He paused. "The thing is," he said, "I don't need to believe I belong here. I just need to keep going." He looked at me, calm eyes, not defiant, actually almost gentle. "Is there anything else you need from me?" he said. I ended the session. I sat in that room alone for a while afterward. In 32 years, I have never ended a trial of pressure early. I ended his because there was nothing left for me to do. I had given him everything I had and he had just received it. Filed it, kept going. I wrote a note to myself that evening that I will reproduce here exactly. He is not unbreakable. Nobody is unbreakable. He is something different. He is already broken in every way I can find, and he keeps going anyway. This report documents the events of Week 9's Combined Live Exercise Operation, designated THORNWALL. Operation THORNWALL is the most complex live exercise in the Predator Division curriculum. All 48 candidates participate simultaneously in a simulated conflict scenario on a full-scale mock installation in the Institute's live exercise theater. The theater spans 6 hectares and includes functional, simulated weapon systems, environmental hazard generators, and a live opposing force team of 8 senior Institute graduates designated OPFOR 7. OPFOR 7 for Harvest 7 cycle consisted of the following individuals: 2 former Korathi candidates who had graduated top of their cycles, 3 Draxani veterans with between 8 and 15 years of actual field experience, 2 Velthari combat specialists, and 1 Belhari explosives technician who is, by any fair assessment, one of the most capable individuals I have had the privilege of observing work. The candidates know OPFOR is experienced. They do not know how experienced. It is by design. I will describe events chronologically. THORNWALL commenced at 600 hours. The candidate cohort was divided into 4 tactical squads: red, blue, gold, and black. Calloway was assigned to Black Squad as a tactical advisory role. His pattern recognition scores had been highest in the cohort, and I placed him where I thought he would best serve the simulation's learning objectives. Black Squad's objective was to secure and hold the installation's central communication hub. Control of the hub controlled the battlefield. Whoever held it controlled both coordination frequency and the installation's automated defense grid. OPFOR 7's priority objective, which the candidates did not know, was also the communication hub. The first 4 hours of THORNWALL ran as expected. Red and gold squads engaged simulated defender systems in the outer perimeter. Blue squad moved on the secondary fuel storage target. Black squad, under the leadership of their designated squad commander, candidate Karethvel Draxani, moved toward the hub. At approximately 10:22 hours, OPFOR 7 made contact with Black Squad in the corridor network beneath the hub. I am going to say clearly, OPFOR 7 was designed to win this encounter. They were superior in numbers, experience, and tactical positioning. The OPFOR briefing had anticipated exactly the route Black Squad took to approach the hub and had prepositioned accordingly. This was not a fair fight. It was not designed to be a fair fight. The pedagogical value was in how candidates respond when they encounter something that was designed to beat them. In the first 90 seconds of contact, OPFOR 7 neutralized 3 of Black Squad's 8 members. Karethvel himself was tagged in a crossfire that should have been avoidable and was not, because Karethvel is an exceptional individual fighter who was, in that moment, outmatched by team tactics he had not encountered before. Black Squad took cover in a staging room off the main corridor. Pinned. OPFOR 7 had covered all 3 exit routes. This was, in exercise terms, a resolved scenario. Black Squad was effectively captured, awaiting formal end-of-exercise extraction. What happened instead is the reason I am writing this report. Calloway had not been neutralized. He had been at the rear of the squad's formation, and when the contact happened, he had gone sideways, not backward, not to cover with the rest of the squad, but sideways into a maintenance corridor that ran parallel to the main route. I later reviewed the sensor logs. He had identified the maintenance corridor's existence during the approach and had been tracking it as a secondary route option. From the maintenance corridor, he could not be detected by OPFOR's sensor array. The maintenance corridors were, technically, below the exercise's sensor coverage. A gap nobody had specifically planned for, but Calloway had found it and was in it. For 8 minutes, OPFOR 7 maintained position. Black Squad stayed pinned. Standard exercise resolution was being executed. Then the communication hub's automated defense grid came online. On OPFOR-7's positions, OPFOR's combat specialist leader Tharvek, the senior Draxani, 15 years of field experience, told me afterward he initially thought it was a system malfunction. Then he thought it was an instructor override. Then the hub's internal lighting went to emergency red, which is the under hostile control status indicator, and he understood what had actually happened. Dren Calloway had gotten through the maintenance corridor, found the hub's secondary access terminal, a terminal that exists in every installation of that type, but that is rarely documented in standard tactical briefings because it is designed for maintenance use, not combat access, and had overridden the hub controls. He had done this alone, pin squad conditions, 8 minutes, under active exercise pressure, on a terminal designed for an entirely different purpose. With the hub active and the grid targeting OPFOR positions, he broadcast on the squad coordination frequency. Black squad, you have 30 seconds. Southeast exit. Go. Carathvel later told me that when he heard that voice on the frequency, he genuinely did not process immediately who it was or how it was possible. He processed 30 seconds and southeast exit, and he moved his squad. With 5 of the original 8 mobile members of Black Squad plus Calloway in control of the hub, OPFOR-7 was forced to extract. In 19 years of TA, OR and WALL exercises, OPFOR had never been forced to extract. They had, in fact, never considered that a possibility. I am required by this report to note that what Calloway did was within the technical rules of the exercise. He had not used any prohibited tools or methods. He had found a gap in the scenario design that we had not anticipated, exploited it with precision and creativity, and changed the outcome of the exercise. I am also required to note that every member of OPFOR-7 filed a separate voluntary incident report about this event. 7 of those reports used, independently, the same word. Unsettling. I agreed to write this account because I think the record is incomplete without the OPFOR perspective, and the OPFOR perspective is specific. When I understood what had happened, that a single human candidate alone had gotten through a maintenance gap I had not covered because my operational experience told me maintenance corridors in this type of installation are not viable tactical routes. They are too narrow for most warrior candidate body types. They are thermally hostile, and they require a detailed understanding of the installation's secondary system architecture that candidates are not expected to have. I went through several distinct mental stages. Stage 1 was denial. Stage 2 was a kind of professional admiration that felt very strange. Stage 3 was something I am going to describe as discomfort, because I think that is the most accurate word. Here is why it was discomfort, and not simply admiration. I have fought sentient opponents in real theaters across 11 systems over 15 years. I have a very well-developed internal model of how threats behave, what a threat feels like, the signature of danger in a tactical situation. The human in the maintenance corridor did not feel like a threat in any way I was equipped to process until he was already inside my perimeter, controlling my communications grid, and broadcasting to the squad I had pinned down. He did not broadcast on an open frequency. He went to his own squad's coordination channel. He gave them 30 seconds and an exit. That was the message. 30 seconds and an exit. That is not bravado. That is not performance. That is operational precision. You do not broadcast on your enemy's frequency and tell them what you are doing. You get your people out. He got his people out. I spent a long time after the exercise thinking about what had allowed him to do what he did, and I came to a conclusion that I will put in this record because I think it is important. Most candidates, most warriors, frankly, operate with a primary tactical framework that is built around what they can do. Their species' advantages, their trained abilities, their physical and biological capabilities. They are optimized for their own strengths. The human operated with a framework built around what was true. He did not think about what a human could or could not do. He thought about what was actually in front of him, what was actually possible in the space, what was actually exploitable. His framework had no built-in assumptions about what he could not do because his species had not given him a category of built-in advantages to center his identity around. He was, as a result, thinking differently than everyone else in the exercise theater. I do not know how you train that into a candidate. I do not know if you can. I think it might come from something that is a lot harder than training. I think it might come from having spent a long time in places where nobody expected you to succeed. Medical Officer Dren Orvath. I am documenting 3 separate incidents from week 10 that I believe belong together in a single record. Incident 1. Candidate Jath Belhari, one of the twins, sustained a training injury during a live-wire exercise, foot caught in a current trap, significant nerve disruption to the lower left leg. He was mobile but impaired. The exercise continued per protocol. Jath was in a position where continuing was possible but painful. Candidate Calloway was in the same exercise group. When I reviewed the sensor record, I noted that for the remaining 40 minutes of the exercise, Calloway had been positioned between Jath and every approach vector. Not conspicuously, it was not performative. He had simply, quietly, adjusted his exercise position so that Jath's injured side was always covered. Jath did not ask him to do this. Calloway did not announce that he was doing it. He just did it. Incident 2. During a tactical debrief in week 10, a data processing dispute arose between 2 candidate groups regarding the correct interpretation of an engagement scenario. The dispute escalated. Korathi candidates do not debate calmly. They debate with considerable physical reinforcement of their arguments, and 2 candidates were heading toward an altercation that would have required instructor intervention. Calloway stood up in the middle of the debrief room, not loudly, and said, "Can I show you something on the board?" He went to the display board at the front of the room and drew a diagram. The diagram illustrated both interpretations and then showed a third position that accounted for the valid elements of each. It was not his argument, not his dispute. He was not taking sides. He had found a synthesis that made both sides technically correct within their respective frameworks and showed them where they agreed. The room looked at the board. The altercation did not happen. I was not present for either of these incidents. I have the censor records and accounts from present parties, but I was present for Incident 3. Incident 3. During the transition period between Week 10's final exercise and the evening meal, I encountered candidate Calloway alone in the corridor outside the infirmary. He was sitting on the floor with his back against the wall and his knees up. I almost walked past. A candidate sitting in a corridor is not unusual. Then I noticed his hands. He had them flat on his knees, pressing down. He was doing a breathing exercise. In, hold, out, slow, methodical. I asked if he was all right. He looked up. "Yeah," he said, "just needed a minute." I sat down on the floor across from him, which is not something I normally do in a professional capacity, but something about the moment called for it. "It's a lot," he said, not as a complaint, as a statement of fact. "The cycle is demanding," I said. He shook his head slightly. "Not the training," he said. "The training is fine. The training is actually the easy part." He was quiet for a moment. "It's the being watched," he said. "I feel it all the time. Every room I walk into, everybody's watching to see what the human does, and I understand why. I don't resent it. But it's there all the time, and sometimes you need a minute to just not be looked at." I did not know what to say to that. "Do you want me to leave?" I asked. "No," he said. "You're okay." He kept doing his breathing exercise. "I'll be fine in about 10 minutes." He was right. In about 10 minutes he got up, straightened his uniform, and walked to the mess hall. I stayed on the floor for a while. I have not been able to stop thinking about that corridor conversation. He was not complaining. He was not falling apart. He was doing 10 minutes of maintenance, the way you service a piece of equipment that has been running at high output and then going back to work. There is something in the human literature, very old, a phrase. The loneliest job in the world is the one that only you can see the inside of. I am not sure that is an exact quote. I am not sure I am remembering it correctly, but I thought of it in that corridor. Candidate Vetharam. I want to tell you when it changed for me. Not when I respected him somewhere around week 2, though I would not have admitted it at the time. I mean when I actually understood what I was seeing. Week 10, night before the mid-cycle assessment. I could not sleep. This happens before big evaluations. Korathi sleep patterns are sensitive to cortisol cycles, and I was running high. I was lying on my bunk in the dark, staring at the ceiling. From the back of the barracks I heard a sound. Very quiet, I almost missed it. Calloway was on his bunk. He had his knees up and he was looking at that photograph, the one from his nightstand, the woman and the children. He was looking at it the way someone looks at something they do not want to forget, in the dark, with no light, just holding it and looking at it. Then he put it down, and he opened his notebook, and he started writing. I could not read what the angle was wrong and the light was too low, but I could see the motion of his hand, steady, slow, like someone getting something out of their system before morning. He wrote for maybe 15 minutes. Then he put the notebook away, put the photograph back on the nightstand, lay down, and in about 4 minutes he was asleep. I lay there for another hour. There was something about watching that, the private ritual of it, the photograph and the writing, and then folding it all away and going to sleep. That was more honest than anything I had seen in the entire cycle, more honest than combat, more honest than the exercises and the assessments. He was carrying something, not the training, something older than the training, and every night he took it out, looked at it, put it back and went to sleep, and every morning he got up and was the person we saw in the daylight hours. I am Korathi. We have a concept. I do not know if there is a trade common equivalent that translates approximately to the strength that knows it is weight. It means the understanding that strength is not absence of burden, but the ability to carry the burden without being bent by it. I have spent my entire life being trained to achieve this quality. I watched a human do it at night when he thought nobody was looking. Filed by Senior Administrator Keth Voss, GWI Administrative Division. Week 11 of the Harvest 7 cycle produced 3 separate administrative events I am required to document. Administrative Event 1, Enrollment Verification Response. The Enrollment Office, operating on its 77th day since the initial flag, which exceeded the maximum 48-hour review window by 75 days, 4 hours, and approximately 17 minutes, issued a formal response regarding candidate Calloway. The response confirmed that his enrollment was, as originally flagged, an administrative error. A processing misroute had placed his application file, originally submitted to the Frontier Peacekeeping Corps Extended Service Program, which shares several intake codes with the GWI intake system, into the Predator Division enrollment queue. The Enrollment Office confirmed that candidate Calloway was not a Predator Division candidate, had not applied to the Predator Division, and should be formally and immediately transferred to the appropriate institution. They requested confirmation of receipt and formal completion of the separation protocol. I forwarded this response to Instructor Malak Sorn as the Senior Instructor of Record for the candidates training group. Administrative Event 2, Instructor Malak Sorn's response. Instructor Malak reviewed the separation protocol request. She then filed what is, in my experience administering GWI for 12 years, the most unusual document I have ever processed through this office. She filed a formal application for immediate exception of student retention. A retention exception is a mechanism that allows an instructor of record, with supporting documentation, to petition high command to retain a student who would otherwise be separated. It is typically used in cases of exceptional performance where standard criteria have been met in non-standard ways. In 19 years of Predator Division operation, a retention exception has been filed 4 times. Instructor Malak's petition cited 11 weeks of documented performance records, 3 independent instructor assessments, the THORNWALL incident report, and a tactical analysis comparing candidate Calloway's performance metrics to the top 5 historical cohort rankings at the Institute. She included a note that I will reproduce here, with her permission. The question before High Command is not whether this candidate was correctly placed. He was not. The question is whether the Galactic Warrior Institute has the structural wisdom to recognize that correct placement is not the same as optimal placement. He was not designed for this. He found a way to be extraordinary here anyway. Sending him away now would not correct an error. It would create a new one. The retention exception was routed to High Command for review. Administrative Event 3. Candidate Calloway was informed of the enrollment error. I was present when Instructor Malak informed him. I will note what happened. She called him into her office in the late afternoon of Day 3, Week 11. She told him the enrollment had been confirmed as erroneous. She told him he had been in the wrong program for 11 weeks. She told him his formal separation papers were being processed and that a transfer to the Frontier Peacekeeping Corps Extended Service Program would be arranged within the week. She also told him about the retention exception petition. He listened to all of it. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "You filed that for me." She said, "It's what the data supports." He did not respond immediately. I watched his face. He was doing the same thing I had seen referenced in other accounts, the processing, the filing, the composure. But I was close enough and I had been watching him long enough to see that this time something came through. Not a lot, just a small thing. A brief, human, unguarded look of something I can only identify as not expecting that. Then it was gone and he was composed again. He thanked her, he left the office. That evening, Candidate Vetharam's communal log records that all 6 mobile members of Barracks 7, Vetharam, Sara, Jath, the second Belhari twin, and 2 other candidates who had been rotating through the barracks, were present in the barracks. Nobody had announced a meeting. They were just all there. When Calloway returned from the instructor's office, the Korathi was sitting on the edge of his bunk across the room. He said, without looking up, "We heard." Calloway stopped, looked at the room. "It's not decided yet," he said. "No," said Vetharam, "it's not." That was the whole conversation, but everyone stayed in the barracks that evening. Nobody went to the common area, nobody went to training. They just all stayed in the same room and did their individual quiet evening things, cleaning equipment, reviewing notes, Sara's evening echolocation maintenance exercises, and they all just stayed there together. That is what I was told. I was not present, but it is what I was told. After full review of the materials submitted by Instructor Malak, including the 11-week performance record, the THORNWALL incident documentation, the trial of pressure notes, the 7 independent instructor assessments, and the compiled barracks accounts, High Command makes the following findings. Finding 1. Candidate Calloway was enrolled in the Predator Division by administrative error. This is not in dispute. Finding 2. Candidate Calloway's performance during 11 weeks at the Predator Division has been extraordinary by any objective metric. and has been specifically extraordinary in ways that do not map cleanly onto the Institute's existing evaluation frameworks. Finding 3. The THORNWALL exercise incident is without precedent in 19 years of program operation. High Command reviewed the full sensor record of that exercise. The review lasted 4 hours. We watched the maintenance corridor sequence 6 times. Finding 4. The testimony submitted by OPFOR Lead Commander Tharvek is the most thoughtful tactical analysis submitted to this office by a non-administrative party in this officer's tenure. It was read twice. Finding 5. The question raised by Instructor Malak Sorn, whether correct placement and optimal placement are the same thing, is a question that does not have a simple administrative answer. It has only a true answer. High Command's decision. The retention exception is granted. Candidate Calloway will be offered the option to complete the Predator Division program as a full candidate in good standing. His 11 weeks of completed training will be credited. His enrollment will be formally reclassified from administrative error to exceptional enrollment. There is no precedent for this designation because it has never been needed before. He may decline the offer without prejudice and transfer to the Frontier Peacekeeping Corps Extended Service Program. The decision is his. High Command adds the following note, not as policy but as observation for the record. This institution has spent 93 years producing warriors. We have done this by identifying the strongest candidates from the most capable species and training them to their maximum potential. The Harvest 7 cycle has produced 47 excellent warrior candidates and 1 question. The question is this: what do we call the thing that Calloway has? We have no category for it. We have no species classification for it. We have no training methodology that reliably produces it. We found it by accident in a human who arrived in the wrong place, and we have spent 11 weeks watching it confound warriors who were born and trained for this. We do not have an answer to what that thing is. We are, however, recording the question. Because if there is an answer, we want to find it. I was told the archive wanted a statement from me. I am not a person who writes about himself easily, so I am going to try to just say what is true. I grew up in a settlement on the edge of the frontier expanse, which most people who have not been there understand as a romantic thing. Frontier life, independence, surviving on the edge. And most people who have been there understand as a cold, loud, very dark experience of being small in an environment that was not designed for you. I joined the Peacekeeping Corps at 19 because I needed work, and because I understood, having grown up in a place that everyone else saw as secondary, that someone had to stand in the secondary places and hold the line. I spent 2 years at Border Station 9. I am not going to describe Border Station 9 in detail. It was difficult in specific ways that people who have been in similar postings will recognize without me saying more. I arrived here because of a filing mistake. I want to be clear about what I knew and when I knew it. I knew within the first 24 hours that there was likely an error. The intake officer told me so. I knew I was not what this place was built for. I could see that clearly in the first 5 minutes in the intake bay. I have been in places that were not built for me my whole life. I did not see a reason to behave differently here. I am not going to tell you that I was not afraid. I was afraid most mornings. Quietly afraid, the manageable kind, the kind you put in a drawer before breakfast. Afraid I would not be enough. Afraid of the specific look people give you when you fail in front of them, not contemptuous, which would be easier, but sorry. The sorry look. I have had enough of the sorry look to last several lifetimes. But I found something here that I did not expect. I found, and I am going to try to say this correctly, that the gap between who you are and where you are is not always a disaster. Sometimes it is the most useful thing about you. I could not fight like a Korathi. I could not sense like a Velthari. I could not absorb hits like a Draxani. What I could do was think from the outside. Think without the assumptions built into the view from inside. Think about what is actually there rather than what my category said should be there. I do not know if that is a human thing. I do not know if that is a frontier expanse thing. I do not know if it is just a me thing. I suspect it is something that happens when you spend enough time being the thing that does not quite fit, and you learn, over years, to work with that instead of against it. High Command gave me a choice. Stay and complete the program, or transfer to the Peacekeeping Corps program where I was originally meant to go. I thought about it for 2 days. Then I thought about the night navigation exercise, and the turret gap, and the maintenance corridor. I thought about Tharvek watching me in the exercise theater with the particular expression of a person who is reassessing something important. I thought about Vetharam not stepping back and me not stepping back, and the two of us finding a way to stand in the same space without it becoming a fight. I thought about Sora's face when I told her about the 2 additional Razorbacks, and she said how. I thought about Instructor Malaksorn ending the trial of pressure early. I thought about those moments, not with pride, I want to be clear about that, with something quieter than pride. With the feeling of something that fits, even when it is hard, even when nothing about the fit is designed or clean. I stayed. I am staying. Not because I think I belong here. I still think the filing mistake was a mistake. I am still not what this place was built for. I am still the smallest candidate in most rooms and the least physically capable by most measurements, and there are things I cannot do here that every other candidate does with species instinct ease. But I have spent 23 years being the thing that does not quite fit. I know how to work with that,